Joining us for her second time on The Informer is human rights lawyer Serene Teffaha. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Well, thank you for being here. We really wanted to touch base because last time you were here and you spoke with my colleague George Donikian, you were talking about a class action that you were mounting against the Australian government in regards to what's been going on with COVID and the lockdowns and the human rights abuses that you saw as being a huge issue. So we wanted to touch base and just see where you're at with that and if there are any updates.
I have been trying to launch this class action now for the last 3 months. and every time I'm ready to sort of launch it or think I'm close, something else happens that I would like to bring into it, or other issues might arise that I feel that I'm not quite ready yet because I'd like to get some more information and be very ready going into the court. But now it's really come time to actually file this thing. And it has been so frustrating for me because I know my clients are frustrated, and it's been a big challenge for me to try and reconcile over 2,000 people's complaints into one document that would truly capture the source of the problem and the source of the issues. There's a lot of confusion around who are the decision makers here, who are actually making these decisions around the lockdowns, around hotel detention, around vaccine, compulsory vaccines and mandating of vaccines, testing, compulsory testing, issues with regards to people who are not symptomatic and people who don't exhibit symptoms, and yet they're being forced into compliance processes without proper notifications, without review rights, without having their, and being forced to pay for those compliance processes. So the hotel detention or holding people in hotels, returning travellers and cross-border travellers being held in hotels, it's at their own expense, which is phenomenal. You have governments that are asking people to comply, and yet they having to foot the bill. And not even criminals and prisoners are exposed to such degradation of their own rights. So it raises fundamentally so many questions and so many spot fires everywhere that I feel like I have to take out. But it's come time to it now to absolutely lodge it. One of the big aspects of the delay, and I'm quite happy and open to talk about it, is finding the right barristers. I don't know what's happened to this world. It just seems that most barristers are bought by the government. They have special deals, and they've been hired in the past to do government jobs. So they're extremely hesitant to actually come forward and stand up for basic rights. I mean, these are basic rights that are being interfered with, and there's the processes and the abuse of the processes is diabolical. And yet I don't see this reaction from the legal fraternity and from my colleagues in terms of getting angry at these serious encroachment of our rights. And this issue raises issues on so many levels: Commonwealth, state, territories, the relationship between them, who makes the decisions, where do you trace the decision? One decision comes and you sort of need to trace it back to where it comes from. Yeah. And who's setting these policies?
So that kind of brings me to the question of, there are obviously people that support you and think that what you're doing is amazing, but there are plenty of people that would say the government is doing everything they can to protect us from something that is terrifying. This pandemic has swept the globe. And I mean, you're talking about the barristers, they could be those people as well, or fall into that category. So what do you say to them that sort of think that the lawsuit you're mounting is frivolous and ridiculous, and you should just let the government take care of us?
Yeah, let's have a talk about that. That's a great little question. I think there are processes that should be applied. We have emergency processes for a reason when you have an emergency. And processes are there to ensure that things are dealt with consistently and proportionately. What I'm angry at isn't necessarily the right of governments to manage crises. That is not what we're upset about here. My clients are not angry at that. What my clients are upset about is the way that this has been managed and the stark inconsistencies that have arisen that are also diabolically in conflict with their own policies. Let me give you an example. A COVID-19 hotspot. What do we think that is? So we've got a definition that is absent of a very critical concept when you're dealing with emergencies, and that is, where are those risks? Where do you actually locate a particular risk that might be emanating from a particular space or a group of people? And how do you manage those outbreaks? Well, we need processes for that and definitions. Well, what would constitute a COVID-19 hotspot? Well, there is a definition that is applying on the national level, that it has to be 3 consecutive days of 10 cases or more. Now, that has not been occurring for a long time in Australia, and yet we have cross-border shutdowns, we have restriction of movements on the basis of a feeling that the states have. Oh, we're going to treat the whole of Victoria as a COVID hotspot. The whole of it is going to be no-go zone. Apparently everyone in Victoria is at risk all the time of significant infection. That's an outrage. Then you've got New South Wales saying, well, you can't come across from this border. Western Australia, we're closing everything off. Queensland, oh, everyone that comes in has to go into quarantine hotel. Northern Territory, on the other hand, come here, no problems. We'll allow you to come through. So you have the right hand and the left hand having no idea what they're doing, because there's nothing that is properly defined. And we are having an encroachment of our rights based on lack of absolute definition, lack of coordination, lack of execution of that coordination, and a complete encroachment on our personal rights. Now, if I'm healthy and I'm not symptomatic, why are you knocking on my door saying I have to be tested, I have to be quarantined, I have to be detained? Why are you sending me someone who doesn't have any understanding of health and science, and they're sitting there trying to tell me I have to comply with something, and you're not even providing me the right responses? And if I start to ask questions with regards to the reliability of the testing that you're using, which we know has problems in the low prevalence setting, okay, that there isn't enough viral loading to pick up to see if in fact you are infected, and let alone if you are infectious. We don't even have proper forensic guidelines in terms of the clinical symptoms that should be assessed and having the right authorized officers to do so. And we are told that the only effects that this virus has is really on the elderly with comorbidity. We're given that information by the CDNA and the PHLN and the AHPPC, these overriding bodies that are meant to be providing these surveillance and information for us to make these decisions. We're being told that by these organizations, and yet the states and the territories are going around saying, this is fatal, this is dangerous, we're all going to die. This is a fallacy. This is a lie. You do not make public policy shaped on lies and distortions and disproportionality and lack of definition and lack of process. What this is showing is that this country is being led by individuals who are incompetent. They're incompetent for the role that they hold. And they are acting as a result of personal relationships that they have with other companies and other foreign interests that may have a stake in this game. So that's what I'm asking. I'm saying, let's dig deep. Let's look at the facts. I'm a facts person. Let's look at the information that we have before us and then make a decision. Don't tell me that you know science. Don't present me that you're science because it comes from the government. APRA says this is what we think science is, and we're going to control all the medical community to enforce the thinking that we say is so, and therefore it is. You know, this is called fascism.
There are people that would say, though, that you don't have a medical degree either.
I don't have a medical degree, but I have a fabulous mind, okay? And guess what? I'm a qualified nutritionist as well, okay?
Oh,
as well as being a qualified. Yes, I am, okay? But the thing is this, I don't need a medical degree to have common sense. I don't need a medical degree to know that that doctor who's wearing a mask and being so scared of me, thinking that I'm going to kill him because I'm not wearing a mask. I don't care how many years he's gone to university. Clearly that doctor is brainwashed. All I have to do is I have to look at the randomized clinical trials. I have to look at the information. I have to look at the information that the WHO has put in their own brief. I've got eyes, I could read, and I'm a lawyer.
The WHO recently came out and said that long-term lockdowns are actually not the answer.
Absolutely. The WHO and the IHR, the International Health Regulations, the World Health Organization statements that have been, have been formalized in terms of directions to the world, and particularly our part of the world, is that we have the containment measures that are necessary, such as social distancing and the spacing that would allow public health measures to take place without going to extreme ends. I mean, look at it. We live in Australia. I mean, we're not in high density places. I mean, you wouldn't call this place a high density place. So it is, again, an issue of proportionality. Australia is applying the law like we are in a deep crisis with like as if hotels are turning into morgues, and this is the type of policy you'd apply. You go hardcore like they're doing now if you have the actual public health risks that are presenting themselves so critically in a very crisis mode, that you have a huge amount of deaths, and the deaths are not occurring only in certain groups like the immunocompromised or the comorbidity with elderly people. Okay, they're actually happening amongst younger people. We've had the time to look and study this now, and enough is enough.
So in Victoria, controversially, there was the Omnibus Bill, and we on The Informer have talked about our thoughts of the Omnibus Bill. What are your thoughts as a lawyer?
The Omnibus Bill was an exercise to show exactly how fascist and authoritarian our governments are becoming. This is an exercise, a PSYOP really exercise, under which government was trying to push something that is so nonsensical, something that is so abusive. What they wanted to push is for police officers and other authorized officials to make assessments based on speculative scientific principles that they're not qualified to make, okay, based on suspicions that someone may or may not have COVID, and then literally go in there with no warning, with no proper processes, with no warrants, and just detain people based on the suspicion. I mean, this sounds to me like what happened with Nazi Germany. I mean, really. And guess what? The Omnibus Bill that they were going to introduce, which is Section 200A, already happened to the detention towers in Victoria. That has already happened and affected the most vulnerable people in our community. Okay, they already sent 500 police officers to quarantine and to detain people in their own homes without notice, without review rights, throwing them food like they are vultures. Okay, on the ground, complete breaches of IPC, which is infection control processes, where they left PPE everywhere on the ground, had no idea how to do management. They already did what the Omnibus did, but because it went that far, there was a big uproar, and Victoria's Liberal Party obviously pushed back heavily. But it's not enough only when it goes so extreme that people feel the need to do something. It's gone that extreme because we haven't been doing things, and they have been encroaching on our rights over a long period of time. And we've been silent, or we've allowed it, or we think, oh, we're not going to be subject to it. But of course, more and more people are now subject to it. So with the Omnibus Bill, it's very important to realize that the Section 200A that they were going to introduce, which was the worst manifestation of that power, has not been introduced.
Right.
But they have slightly increased the powers of police officers, such that they're allowed to make certain decisions with public health emergency powers around entering people's premises without warrants, okay, and even on a likely basis. So that has occurred, which is bad enough in my mind, okay. And really, what I'm shocked is police officers. Stop doing what you're doing. What are you doing? You are part of the community, and you're turning on your community simply because someone is saying to you, you should. You know, they say we want to manage public health risks, and yet they've got 70, 80 police officers coming together with no social distancing and grappling with people and, you know, arresting them on the ground and there's no social distancing there.
Have you spoken to any police officers in the course of putting this case together?
Yes, I have spoken to a number of police officers.
And what are their feelings on the whole situation? Because I assume that for, I don't know whether they agree or disagree, but for most of them, they're following orders. This is their job and there is a chain of command. And if they don't follow, they'll lose their jobs.
I think there needs to be now some bravery expressed by individual police officers, which I'm working on at the moment with some police officers. I can't disclose too much, but it will become evident soon with regards to the necessity of police officers themselves saying no. You know, they need to consolidate together. And not just police officers, we also need the health professionals to consolidate too. And very much we also need the army, the military, the Navy, the Air Force officers as well to say no. They need to understand that the decision makers at the top are not patriots. Okay, they're not patriots. The people running the force, they're not patriots. The people running the military, they're not patriots. Okay, a patriot would not sell off or put a 99-year lease on a port, on a critical port, Port Darwin. You just don't do that if you're a patriot.
That was China, correct?
That was with China, absolutely. If you're a patriot, you don't enter into road and belt initiatives that give preference to construction companies that are overseas ahead of your own construction companies. You don't do that if you're a patriot. You know, and I'm not this, you know, this patriot and people, oh, you're right wing, you're this. I've got two wings, left wing and right wing, and I use both to fly. I'm not a left wing and I'm not a right wing. I'm just a bird that wants to use the two wings, okay? And I want to fly and be free. Yeah, and I understand what freedom means to a lot of people. And being free is also having respect to this land. And when I say being patriotic, I mean that having pride in the land we have and having pride in ensuring that we all have equal access to the resources, equal access to our rights, to live in freedom and in self-dignity and preservation.
Well, talking about freedom, Daniel Andrews has finally opened Victoria up. He is supported by a lot of people, but there have been people that have been incredibly critical of his decision to keep Victoria locked up as long as he has. So what are your thoughts on the timing of him opening up? I mean, clearly you don't agree with the lockdowns at all, but I mean, do you have any thoughts about the timing of him opening up now?
It cannot be trusted. People need to understand that what is going on in this country is open and shut, open and shut. This is what the game that they're going to be playing with us over the next period of time. They will open it up, and then they will create certain scenarios that will then tighten it up and shut it down. The damage has been...
There'll be more shutdowns.
Oh yes, absolutely. There'll be more shutdowns. That is part of that PSYOP process under which they're actually trying to implement a lot of different agendas. They're not just local agendas. There's a lot of international agendas that are also playing here. And I'm not shying away of expressing that now, because I do see that from the information and the evidence that I have perused. And I am very deeply concerned, you know, by these types of agendas that are illogical. It's not going to stop our challenge, because our challenge is to the process. We're saying operationally, you're not doing the right thing. Okay, the operational rules that you've used to open and shut, and we have no trust in the processes that you're using. We've got no trust in the fact that the communication between all the states and the territories and between the Commonwealth has broken down. Everyone's doing their own thing, and everyone's applying ad hoc definitions to key terminology and terms. The other problem that we're going to have now is we're going to open you up, but we're going to regulate the hell out of you. Okay, we're going to bring in COVID marshals to every workplace. You need to have a COVID marshal, apparently, an officer within your workplace who's nominated as a COVID marshal. And they need to be COVID trained by the government, on how to deal with COVID issues. Okay, so
has this been publicised? Because that is the first time I've ever heard of that.
Yeah, it is. You see, this is where the second limb of this, you've got the lockdown as being one problem. The second limb of that now is we're going to tell you how you need to engage as part of a society for you to actually then participate in that society. Another aspect too is that, so the COVID marshals, COVID safety plans that are now forcing on all of the workplaces. Now we have a ridiculous amount of red tape and bureaucracy already for businesses, let alone suffocating them more. We have OH&S processes that they have to apply. There is nothing different about this virus, okay, that would force a workplace to somehow do anything that is particularly different. But now they're going to bring in density requirements. They're going to bring in COVID safety plans. They're going to do spot checks on people and fine people more. Oh, you don't have your COVID safety plan. We're going to get you now. Okay, where's your COVID marshal? I mean, look at the words that they're using. It's like real kind of Wild West type of behaviors. And then also add to it, apart from the red tape and all the other issues, the bureaucratic debacles, there's also the information that they're actually forcing certain spaces like gymnasiums and restaurants and other places to actually force the patrons that come to use the system to provide their contact details. That means if I'm going to go visit a restaurant, I have to give my name and details and address. Mm-hmm. Why do I have to do that? That is going to be a critical problem to a lot of restaurants and a lot of users. But I will note this for your reference. Premises that have sex on premises, so, brothels and other services where there's sex on the premises, they don't need a COVID marshal, apparently. Okay, so where the real risks are, apparently, we don't need no COVID marshals for those places, okay? But we need a COVID marshal if you're going to go to a gym, and you need a COVID marshal if you're in a restaurant. This is an outrage. This is diabolical. It's not the end. The lockdown or easing the lockdown is not the end of the story. There is a complete sense of irrational takeover and a micromanaging that is way beyond what is acceptable.
Okay, so because we spoke to businessman Liam Wood recently, who is in Mildura, 600 kilometres away from Melbourne. He was talking about the fact that if somebody does the wrong thing, gets through the ring of steel, makes it to his business and then lies on the sign-in sheet, he will get fined $10,000. But what you're saying is if that same person goes to a brothel, they don't need to sign in, there's nothing...
No, they don't need no sign-in in a brothel, okay? They just need a COVID safety plan. That's all they need.
And then
okay,
what about strip clubs? Because that falls under the sex industry...
Only COVID safety plans, okay? You only need a COVID marshal for religious gatherings, apparently. If you're gathering for God, you need a marshal. But if you're gathering for sex, you don't need no marshal. I mean, it's absurd. They're talking about physical distancing and social distancing and masking and density requirements, and yet sex premises, let's not talk. Let's just ignore that one. Shh. Let's ignore that one. I mean, to me, if this is not the epitome of what is filth and what is shameful and what is perverted in this nation, I don't know what is, okay? And so, call them out, I say. We call them out on their hypocrisy, okay? And so they're saying, oh, it's all for the management of your health. All right, well, why are you not applying a consistent brush across, okay, these businesses? And why are you bringing in measures that are unrealistic, ridiculous, and they're going to cripple businesses?
So I'm not trying to harp on the whole sex industry thing, but are brothels currently working and open for business? Or are they shut down?
In many places, they of course are open. And
they are still open.
Of course, this is the hypocrisy. This is the epitome of the hypocrisy in this nation.
I would have
Okay,
thought that would have been the last place to open up, to be perfectly
oh
honest.
no, they're open. They're open for business. Okay, but the thing is that I'm not criticizing and I'm not passing judgment on the individual businesses.
No.
What I'm saying is I'm looking at this holistic aspect of what they're trying to do. You know, it's very ad hoc. It's very disproportionate. It's very much, you know, I'm going to tell you what's essential and what's not essential. Tomorrow, I'm going to say to you, shut down. Today, you can open. I could tell you what you could sell and what you can't sell. I have to tell you I mean, everyone needs to good mud bath. That's what I think. Everyone needs to go and roll in the mud a little bit, okay? Because this country now is being led by people who've got OCD and hypochondria. And let's be honest, these issues have already pre-existed in our society to huge effects, okay? There's a lot of psychological issues around germophobia, and our understanding of infectious disease is completely flawed, and it is completely taken over by this, you know, germaphobe, hypochondriac state of mind. Okay, and now we're being told that that's the right state of mind to have. This is an absurdity. You know, we were only rocking it out in concerts not long ago, and going to gatherings, you know, not long ago. There are, you know, there is a scientific understanding of infectious disease that has gone out the window. You know, infectious disease doesn't work by just, it's going to jump from one party to another simply because you are in a gathering that is less than 1.5 meters.
If we had, so the Spanish flu back in the early 1900s, that was a death rate of around 33%. If we had a death rate that was similar to that, and then the measures in place by the government that we currently have, if they were in place with a 33% death rate, would you be more supportive of those measures of social distancing and staying away from people, closing businesses to stop the interaction?
I think the analogy that keeps coming up between this and Spanish flu is neither here or there. The Spanish flu had very specific reasons as well why it manifested. There was serious sedentary issues and sanitation issues, post-World War environment, issues in terms of displacement of a lot of people. There were a lot of critical problems that triggered that particular circumstance that we don't see in this particular...
I'm not saying that they're similar things. I'm just saying if the death rate, as we stand today,
Absolutely.
if the COVID death rate was at 33%, would you then support the measures that the government have put in place?
If our AFL stadiums were being filled with dead bodies rather than sports stars running around and scoring goals, yes. But our AFL stadiums are filled with footy players kicking goals and high-fiving each other. I just don't think that that's the same. Unless that the footy fields become a morgue of dead footy players, then I'd say, yeah, let's go to the higher aspects. Okay, let's take it up a notch. But right now, we've got footy players high-fiving each other and running around and being able to go and have fun with each other. Okay, I just don't think we're in a crisis.
So just to finish up on this, because there is something else I want to talk to you about. Do you have a timeline for how long this case will take? I mean, you said you're just about ready to sort of get it all moving. How long does something like this take to get through the courts and come to a final conclusion?
I anticipate this will take time. I know the frustrations of my clients and people wanting to have it in right away. I express that the frustrations are also shared by me because I've been wanting to solicit really good barristers to take the lead because I do want the win. I do want it to be organised and I do want to dot my I's and cross my T's. But it is now very close to being launched. It will take time. This case isn't about getting a quick result. This case is about taking a stand and going, we can see your hypocrisies, we can see your inconsistencies, we can see what you're going to do. It's not going to end with the end of a lockdown or an opening. It's going to end with common sense, hopefully. It's going to end with reason. It's going to end with understanding the serious problems and the flaws with the lack of, as I was saying before, lack of personal integrity, our nation being sold off to foreign interests and many people having their hand in this pie. It's going to have to end with with sovereign issues. It's going to have to end with, us as a nation understanding that we are being taken over by very corrupt bureaucrats. So the process is going to take time. This is just the beginning. I intend on, on making a big movement in this country, a movement of consciousness, a movement of truth, a movement of love your fellow neighbor, love your fellow, your fellow colleague. We've forgotten to love each other. We've forgotten to have our hearts on each other. Okay,
well,
we just
are very scared based on the information that they've been given.
Absolutely. It's time for them to rise above the fear and come into the knowledge that is the truth, and understand that this country is at a huge risk right now. We're in a very big risk of a global takeover, of a takeover of our land and our space. It's already happened, and we need to understand that dynamics and what that means for us. Everybody wants a finger of the pie in Australia. It's resource rich, population low. If I was a diabolical egomaniac who has a lot of power, I would want to take over Australia too. But thank God I'm not.
You're the greatest country in the world.